Welcome to the Natasha Helfer Podcast. To help keep this podcast going, please consider donating at natashahelfer.com and share this episode. To watch the video of this podcast, you can subscribe to Natasha's channel on YouTube and follow her professional page at Natasha Helfer, LCMFT, CST-S. This podcast addresses many topics around mental health and sexuality. It may not be suitable for minors. Some topics may elicit a trigger or emotional response, so please care for yourself accordingly. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or feelings of Natasha Helfer or the Natasha Helfer Podcast. We provide a platform for open and diverse discussions, and it is important to recognize that different perspectives may be shared. We encourage our listeners to engage in critical thinking and form their own opinions. The intro and outro music for these episodes is by Otter Creek. Thank you for listening.
All right, hello, welcome everybody. This is Natasha Helfer, and I am so excited to have a guest today she's a colleague and a member of the Mormon Mental Health Association with me, and we love talking about all kinds of things. Welcome to my podcast. This is where we attack shame any freaking way we can because it's not good or healthy for us. So that is kind of the basis of my podcast. We talk about mental health, we talk about sexuality, we talk about spirituality and religion and the intersection of all those things and how they impact our lives. So that's usually if I'm interviewing somebody, it's because they fit into some of that spectrum. If you're wanting more information about me or my practice, you can find me at simcounseling.com or natashahelfer.com. We have a lot of exciting things coming up. We have several groups starting at Symmetry. I'm running a few of them for ethical non-monogamy and religious trauma and female sexuality and mixed orientation marriages. So if any of those things apply to you, we're going to be starting some groups in the next few months. So make sure you look us up. As usual, we do services for therapy and for coaching and for wellness. And we also are offering ketamine as a specialized way to do some work as well. So that's a little bit about me. But today we're going to be talking about a really, I think, cool topic, which is pornography use. And quite frankly, I haven't talked about this much lately. I think I over-talked about it for years. I got tired. I got tired of repeating myself over and over and over again. So I haven't done a podcast specifically on this topic for a minute. And I'm really excited to have Natalie come on and share a little bit about her research. And you caught my attention, Natalie, because of a meme.
A flyer. Yeah, the flyer. A handout. I'm really bad at all this technical language of all these things we come up with, but it's very nicely put together. She's comparing kind of a model, kind of like the idea of like how a lot of people think about this topic from an addictions lens. Like you hear a lot of people talking about sex or porn addiction, and that's something that I've been trying to educate the public on for a long time, that's really not appropriate language to be using for these issues. And so you're talking about that kind of a model versus the model or a way to consider it, which is moral incongruence. And we're going to delve into that. But before we do that, I would love to give you a chance to introduce yourself, because Natalie is a licensed mental health counselor. She's working out of Washington State. I know that you work with LGBTQIA+ clients. I know you work a lot with faith transitions and religious trauma and childhood trauma. And I know you have a master's degree from Westminster University here in Salt Lake City. So yes.
Other than those basic things, I'd love to have you tell us about yourself.
Yes. I have been in Washington State for 2 years. I moved out here after I graduated from Westminster with a master's in counseling. And I work primarily with LGBTQIA clients, queer clients, religious faith transitions. I myself had that religious faith transition out of the LDS church about 20 or so years ago. So a lot of my clients appreciate that I know the nomenclature. I know what a bishop is. I know what the stake president is. I know that if you're going to the steakhouse, you're not going to go for dinner. You're going to go for a long talk. So my clients appreciate that. They don't have to spend, 3 or 4 sessions educating me on that. I also work a lot with neurodivergent clients. I'm poly and kink affirming. I'm telehealth only right now.
yeah, and I've just been really enjoying discovering Washington since I'm a newer person here, and enjoying working with the clients out here. It's been wonderful.
That's wonderful. So do you work primarily in the space of kind of faith transitions and religious trauma? Do you work primarily with Latter-day Saint, / Mormon adjacent folks, or do you work with a variety? Because I know we're not the only ones that are experiencing a lot of religious transition, right?
Yeah. I find that post LDS people do find me because I am post LDS and disclose that on my website and advertising stuff. I have had some ex-evangelicals reach out. Any high demand religion, any religion that you're trying to deconstruct from, I have worked with. So it's been great. Right. It's been cool. Yeah.
Lots of similarities, right? Even if some of the language is different. Like I know I lived in Wichita, Kansas for many, many years. So I was very familiar with some of the Christian denominations that tend to be more high control. And you have Jehovah's Witnesses, you have Scientologists, you have, a lot of these kinds of spaces where people from a social science perspective, these religions would be considered more high control or high demand.
Yes.
So, it's good to find people who know how to work with those kinds of things.
Yeah.
What about just, if you don't mind, just personally, like what brought you into the field? What got you interested in all of this? Like what kinds of things?
In the field of psychology in general, or in psychology in general? Yeah. So I started my journey into the field a little later in life. I was an accountant for 15 years and I hated it. And I saw my own journey in therapy and thought, there's something to this. And I've always been interested in why we are the way we are, what makes us who we are, why we act the way we do, why, I've got two siblings, their life has led very different paths than mine, but we're from the same family. Why is that? So when I went back to school, I never finished my undergrad, so I had to go back to school. I was like, I'm not going to do accounting. This is boring. I hate it. What am I going to do that fills me and that I want to start doing? And I thought, I kind of want to get into this therapy thing. Let's try it. And here we are. I'm finished out my undergrad. I finished out my grad degree, and I am now doing therapy, and I love it. I love it so much. Not to knock accounting. It's great if you love it, but this feeds my soul a lot better.
I think lots of people choose a second career, somewhere along the line. So that's great when that works out for folks.
Yeah.
So, okay. So you came up with this flyer, which by the way, I'll eventually include in the show notes, because I think a good little, helpful to organize kind of thoughts and ideas. And it's titled Porn Addiction versus Moral Incongruity. So why don't we just dive into how did you get interested in this? Why did you come up with this to begin with?
Yes. Well, this was actually for a school assignment a couple of years ago when I was in grad school. And I have always, since I left the church, I have been deconstructing a lot of things. And I think deconstruction is an ongoing process. And really looking at, what have I been told is wrong? And is that wrong? Have I decided that's wrong, or do I think it's wrong because somebody has told me that it's wrong? So we had to pick a topic for a human sexuality class I was in, and one of the suggested topics was porn addiction. I thought, this is interesting. So I dove into this project with the question of, is porn an addiction, and how do we treat it? And through reading all the research and doing all the research, I found out that porn addiction isn't really a thing the way a lot of treatment modalities say it is a thing, and went from there and created this handout for people, and enriched my knowledge about it.
Was that surprising to you? Like, were you surprised with what you found?
Yes and no. Yes and no. I could tell that a lot of the wording, a lot of the language around pornography addiction was very loaded and very shaming, which to me did not feel good as a new budding clinician. And it felt counterintuitive to how we should treat possible things we want to change within ourselves. Shame is not the answer, and shaming things is not the answer. So that didn't surprise me. I was surprised to dig into a lot of the research that a lot of anti-porn and shame models use, and the research that they quoted, if I went and read the actual research article, is very different than what they were saying. For example, porn changes the brain. Well, they cited a research article that says that the brain changes with what we interact with, which is true, right? Our neurons create pathways in our brain, and the more we interact with something, the easier that pathway becomes reinforced. But that's with anything. Think of when you move out of a house and you go to turn on the light switch in your new house where your old light switch was, and it's not there. That's the brain changing to our environment. So it was really interesting to have an opportunity to really dig into the research and look at this in a non-biased, well, semi-non-biased way. I think I was hoping to find out that pornography is not as dangerous and evil and horrible as a lot of churches say it is. But yeah, I found that it's there's a lot more gray area, and the research is a lot more nuanced. It needs to be more nuanced than some people are saying it is.
Symmetry is now offering ketamine services. To find out more, go to simcounseling.com/ketamine-services.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I agree. Like right now, this conversation, you're changing my brain, Natalie. You're changing it right now.
Yes.
But I don't know that I'm a Natalie addict.
We need to change that.
But that I should be super scared that right now our conversation is changing, and firing neurons and all kinds of things are happening in my brain. So it is interesting how that's often used in this really weird kind of non-correlation, kind of way. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. Okay. So when you think about, you had kind of set up a format of things for me to ask you about, which is great. And you start off with kind of like assumptions of the conversation. So tell me a little bit more what you mean about that. What kinds of assumptions are out there? What do most people kind of think? I think especially those coming from high demand religion, but not only those, can have a lot of assumptions about like what you're saying, that this is dangerous, that this is bad, that somehow it's going to mess up our sexuality, or is that kind of what you're referring to?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of assumptions around that. The way that I was going with this was I wanted to cover some ground rules, perhaps, for the conversation is a better way of putting it, because pornography is a very loaded topic. There are a lot of different areas and nuance in it that we cannot go over today because it would take way too much time. So in discussing the use of pornography and viewing pornography, this conversation assumes that people that are viewing it are of the legal age to view porn. There is research that shows that any exposure to sexual things before an appropriate age is going to cause harm. So we're not talking about 9-year-olds accessing porn. We're talking about adults accessing porn. I also wanted to speak to consent. This is assuming consent both in the people watching the porn and the people creating the porn. I also did want to name that there's ethical porn and non-ethical porn. And this is not the conversation about that. Like any industry, pornography does have its issues. There's a great book on that, Porn Wars, by, I did not put the author. Porn Wars, spoiler alert, capitalism sucks, regardless of the industry you're in. So there are legitimate complaints and issues with the making of porn. That's not the conversation today. The conversation today is pornography an addiction? How do we interact with it? How do we treat pornography addiction if it exists? So I just wanted to say that because I think it's important to name that and name the different other nuances and things floating out there about porn.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think obviously, and I love how you frame that there's problems in all industries. What I do think is interesting, and I do think people should think about a little bit, is that if you and I were having a show right now on the health of cucumbers and maybe some ideas about why cucumbers are healthy for you or not healthy for you and how they can be used, I really doubt that the ethics of cucumber making would ever be brought up by a viewer.
Right.
There are huge ethical considerations right now with where our cucumbers are coming from, who's picking them, who's getting paid to pick them, how those, and so, but it's so interesting that nobody even ever really brings that up. But the minute you bring up porn, this comes up. But what about the sex workers? What about the performance workers, right? And
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that's interesting. And yes, we should look at that. And why are we not bringing that for every other product that we consume, whether it's your food, your clothing, your wedding rings, etc. Right?
Yes.
So I think that's important for listeners to start thinking, why is it that in some industries we don't even think about it? And why, when it comes usually to sexual industries, it's all we can think about?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
Which goes to the taboos and the morality issues that we place on sexuality versus other things, even though all of the industries take advantage of people sometimes. So, all right. So then moving on, do you want to talk a little bit about, I think you had gathered some data on Utah porn use in particular.
Yes.
I mean, both you and I come from a Mormon background. And so we're interested in Utah statistics, since that's kind of where the church is headquartered, and the majority, a large population trends to be LDS.
Yes, and I think looking at specific trends in Utah can be interpolated into the Mormon influence, the LDS influence. So just quickly, porn use in Utah is very high. It has the highest rate of porn consumption in the United States, based on state. It's been number one in the nation for paid porn subscriptions. And there are also more treatment groups for porn addiction than in any other state. We also had a porn czar. I say we because, I lived in Utah for so long, even though I'm in Washington. We also had a porn czar from 2000 to 2018, whose job it was, appointed by the government, whose job it was to reduce porn use, bring awareness to the quote unquote dangers of porn. The budget for that was around $150,000 a year, if I remember correctly. So a lot of money being poured into that.
Yeah, the state of Utah decided that pornography is a public health crisis, which made it then feasible to throw monies at, like a public health concern. I think that's interesting, particularly in this state where we have truly an air pollution crisis. Yeah. And we have, some other environmental crises that don't trend to get the type of attention that, again, sexuality does. And I do think it's also interesting. I don't have the statistics in front of me, but I know I've seen the states, and Utah's at the top, but the other states that flank Utah as far as coming down are typically more the conservative states, like Alabama, where there's a high Baptist population, Southern Baptist population, or, Tennessee, or, Kentucky. Those are all going to be states that are going to have higher porn use than other states that would maybe trend more liberal. So that's interesting, right? That's interesting. Why are conservative folks more apt to turn to sexually explicit media than maybe those who aren't? Not that people who aren't conservative aren't using sexual media, but it's interesting that they trend to be less obsessive or compulsive or impulsive about it. So that's an interesting trend.
Yeah, and I think too, it speaks to the lack of knowledge and open discussion about that. Back to this idea of this conversation talks about adults watching porn. One of the ways that you get kids to not investigate porn is by talking openly about sex and sexuality at developmentally appropriate ages. A lot of people do turn to pornography for sexual education because sex is so stigmatized, and they don't have anybody they can talk about it with. And so, teens are getting their sex education from porn, which is not the best thing. We don't want that. Talking openly and honestly about sex, about your body is the way to mitigate that. But again, in Utah, we don't talk about it like that. So I think a lot of people do turn to it.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I don't love it. I just mean I love the information. I'm actually quite distressed about it. So I'm distressed that my people who seem to be so upset about this use it more because of the ways that we deal with it, right? And so we could normalize it more and have less shame, and then we probably wouldn't have as many issues. But it's difficult when you have any behavior that's monitored at the level that porn is monitored to not have an unhealthy relationship with it. I would say that it's similar in the diet culture, right? Like if I have a very strict relationship with my carbs and my calories, I'm going to have a much harder time navigating healthy eating than if I would just be more flexible and less harsh on myself.
Yes.
Correlation versus causation, right? So I think most
Yes.
of us have probably taken at least maybe some high school course around statistics or something where we understand that if you have a black cat and an orange cat and they both do the same things, it doesn't mean that orange cats necessarily, it's kind of something like that. So you gave an example of like ice cream sales and murder both increase in the summer. So does that mean that if you're going to eat ice cream, you're more likely to become a murderer?
Right. Or that we need to stop ice cream sales because obviously that's what's causing murders to rise. I wanted to go over a couple problems or a couple knowledge points that are important to talk about when talking about this conversation about pornography and the research behind it. A lot of the studies that people cite to say, yes, porn is addictive. Yes, porn changes your brain. Yes, porn causes all of these things, aren't looking at correlation and causation. Just because two things are linked together, or just because two things happen to, ice cream sales rise in the summer and murders rise in the summer, just because those both rise together in the same time period does not mean that one causes the other or that they're even related. There could be an outside, what we call a confounding variable. Heat example. In this example could be one, or longer daylight times, again, could affect this. And that's not looked at all in this study. A lot of the studies that say porn is addictive, porn is bad, use those logical fallacies.
Yeah, exactly. And so how does this get used in kind of this argument of porn? What kinds of things are people trying to say cause or correlate? Like one, for example, that comes to mind is like, well, if you look at porn and, dopamine is released, then porn and, now becomes addictive. Well, porn has caused that dopamine release. And that's one thing. Or like, if you look at porn, you're more than likely going to ruin your marriage. Let's say if you're married, right? Are those kind of some of the examples?
Those are a big one that I found also was impulsivity. A lot of studies tried to say that porn use caused impulsivity. There is a link between higher rates of usage of porn for a person and their impulsiveness, but we don't know if somebody that is more impulsive would seek out porn more often than somebody who isn't as impulsive. So that's one that really is kind of throughout the literature is impulsivity. Another one again are those brain changes. Our brains change no matter what we do, and also we don't know if what we're seeing in the brain that is similar among a lot of high usage of porn, is that because of the porn, or is that because people who have those specific brain traits would seek out porn more often?
Right. And even like sexual drive, like we know that people kind of come wired with different types of sexual drive. So, it's like, well, porn causes you to have higher sexual drive. Maybe you had higher sexual drive, and so now you're more interested in looking at porn, right? So that's what comes first, the chicken or the egg. And none of the studies can even address this. It's very difficult, for example, to find adults who have never looked at any sexually explicit material so that we can see what their brain looks like versus people who, don't. Or even how does masturbation fit into this? None of the studies, really look at that. Okay. So as far as one of the things that trends to be said a lot in high demand religions is that porn will ruin your relationships. It will ruin your ability to have relationships. It will ruin your ability to have sex with a partner. That, people will choose pornography instead of their partners if they look at porn, and that pretty much marriages are doomed and gloomed if anybody's looking at porn. Is that fair? Would you agree with that?
A lot of people assume that. When you actually dig into the studies, a different story is told. A 2011 study found that viewing porn increased participants' desires to be closer to their partner and led to more positive evaluations of participants' own sexual behaviors. However, participants did report increased shame and guilt, which is important and something we're definitely going to address in a little bit after we get through some of these points. Studies show that women report an increase in relationship satisfaction when watching porn, and men report decreased relationship satisfaction and more guilt when watching porn. Studies also show that couples who view porn with their partner report increased intimacy, more sexual satisfaction, and less sexual boredom. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. And of course, I want to say that every individual is different. Just because a report says something doesn't mean that that's going to translate to every individual person, but we can look at general trends.
Yeah, right. So actually, I don't know that I would call it a mixed bag. I think it's actually quite positive.
Well, the increase in shame and guilt, especially for men, right, I think is the mixed bag portion.
Right. But again, I think this is porn creating that? Is porn creating the shame and guilt? Probably not, right?
Probably not, yeah.
But the messages around porn,
yes,
you know, the men who look at porn and then go to church and hear how awful they are because they've looked at porn, or they've grown up with messages that tell them, oh, you're kind of a sexual pervert or a sexual, or, you know, there's even the slippery slope stuff that comes up a lot at church. Like, oh, if you look at porn, not only will you ruin your marriage, it's the slippery slope to then having infidelity or being a sexual criminal or even being a pedophile, right? I mean, those are kind of horrific things that you're told. And so I think there's that internalized shame and guilt. Plus, if you are in a relationship where there is this kind of moral idea that you shouldn't look at porn, and now you feel like you've betrayed your partner or your wife's going to be upset if she's found out you look at porn, that can increase shame and guilt. But I'm like, is that porn's fault? Whereas the things that you're saying that are actually beneficial, I can see how they are actually porn's fault. I think it's porn's fault that if two people are looking at it and they're kind of on the same page and they're finding it enticing and exciting and they're doing something new and novel together and they're getting ideas, I think that's porn's fault. Does that make sense?
It does. And that's a really interesting way to look at it, that I don't know that I looked at it from that particular lens before. So yeah.
Right. So that's really that's what makes the difference between when porn is helpful for people versus when it isn't. Yes. It's a lot of what the story they're telling about porn to themselves and to their partnerships. So if you have partnerships where they're both great with it, it's not seen as betrayal. It's seen as something fun and exciting to do. It's seen as something enhancing. It can enhance their relationship. Obviously, for a couple who is maybe mainstream LDS and sees it as something horrific and that could cause betrayal trauma, they're going to have a much different experience with the same video that another couple would watch. Yes.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, exactly.
And that's another point I like to make, that, by the way, drugs don't make that distinction. It doesn't matter if you're LDS or not, or, atheist. Drugs are going to affect everybody pretty similarly.
Yes. Yes. And that brings us to another good topic that a lot of people talk about with porn addiction. It's in the porn addiction. You're addicted to porn. You're addicted to sex. To date, the porn addiction model and the sex addiction model has not been scientifically validated. There's an accumulating body of empirical and critical scholarship on the topic that provides strong evidence against it. And also, addiction and drugs do very specific things to the body and the brain. One thing that people point out is that with drug addiction, there are withdrawal symptoms. When you stop porn, there's not the same withdrawal symptoms. You may, be antsy. You may need to occupy yourself with something else because there is that behavior piece. But you're not getting the shakes, the sweats. You don't have to be hospitalized because you're worried about dying from withdrawing from a substance. And that's a pretty important distinction, I think, in this conversation.
I think it's hugely important. I've talked about this many times. I did work with heroin substance dependence at the first 2 years of my career, and I did see those types of, withdrawal symptoms. Very scary for people, very difficult to recover, it's a process to go through that. Oftentimes you do need hospitalization. I think it's actually quite offensive to those who deal with those kinds of issues to compare the two. Being uncomfortable because you have to change your behavior. Well, I'm uncomfortable when I try to stop biting my nails, but that doesn't mean that I need to be hospitalized for that, or that I would call that a nail biting addiction, right? And so it is very problematic how these things are talked about. Okay, so let's
I before we move on, I do really just kind of want to repeat this. I think that this is important for people to hear twice. So I just want to say that when couples, so if you're partnered and you both are fairly morally, congruent with the decision to see if you would like to have sexually explicit materials as a way to share and increase your sexual intimacy with another person, those people report increased intimacy, so feeling closer to one another. They report better sexual satisfaction, which, by the way, that is a huge complaint in the sex therapy field, right? Most couples come in because they're sexually unsatisfied. So this actually increases sexual satisfaction. It's playful, it's fun, it's invigorating, to be able to share these kinds of things with another person, and less sexual boredom. So let's not just pass that over like, oh, the study says, let's just repeat it, let it sink in. I think that's really important.
I think it's important too, because it is something that is not often talked about. A lot of times only the downsides or the supposed evils of porn or what are talked about. And there are studies that show positive outcomes.
Yeah, right. And I think this is important, especially if you're in a female body, because so many females, especially coming out of religiously conservative cultures, have had we've all had our sexuality suppressed, but females in particular, not because our own sexuality was suppressed, but because we were expected to gatekeep male sexuality, right? So it's kind of like a double doozy. And I think a lot of times because of that, women suffer from low sex drive or feeling like the implications of duty sex, or, so being able to find your own sexuality, to what turns you on, to what things are exciting or fun for you. It's really important to know that actually this could be a tool that you could use. It doesn't have to be a tool that you use, but for a lot of women, I've heard over my career that they're like, wow, this was like an entryway into an erotic aspect of myself that I had never been tapped into before. And it gave me permission to see other women and to see sexual acts and to be, kind of just intentionally present around sexuality for myself.
Yeah. And so as you said, we don't get that growing up. We don't get those healthy sexual experiences talked about, modeled for us, and our sexuality is repressed to a point where we cannot even explore those things for ourselves in a lot of high demand religions. And so having tools such as pornography or, erotica, masturbation tools can really help us start to explore that, especially when we've not been allowed to explore that for so long.
Totally agree. All right, so let's delve in a little bit more, because a lot of people might push back, like we don't agree. It's got to be problematic. You've already mentioned a few things like this idea that it changes the brain, although we've already said several times, everything changes the brain. You listening to this program is changing your brain. You looking at puppies on Instagram is changing your brain. So you smelling a newborn baby is changing your brain. These are all the positive things, all the things that we see as moral change our brains. Exercise changes your brain. But we don't then say, oh no, it's changing our brain, let's not do these things that have all these benefits. But because, the whole topic of sexuality is so morally kind of based, you might just have a lot of stories around it that make you feel negative. So do you want to talk a little bit about what are the things that, when people think like this, but it's problematic, whether it's addictive or not, it's problematic, it's causing me problems. What do you want to say about that?
Yeah. So when looking, or working with a client, when looking at quote unquote problematic porn abuse, it's really important to kind of explore and ask what is problematic. I've had clients come in that will say, oh, I've got a problem with porn. And then through exploring it with them, I'm like, okay, well, what does a problem look like to you? How often do you watch it? Oh, once or twice a week. Oh, okay. Well, how long do you watch it for when you watch it? Oh, an hour or two, or not even an hour or two. Like, 15, 20 minutes. Okay. Is it interfering with your work? Are you watching it at work? Well, no. Are you watching pornography instead of having intimate time with your partner? No. So it's really interesting to hear what people's perception of problematic use is. I think it's important to look at the time you're spending using it, the consequences of you using it. If you're looking it up at work and you're getting fired, that's a problem. Just as if, you were having a compulsive shopping addiction and going shopping. Well, I shouldn't even say compulsive shopping addiction because that puts the word addiction in there. Compulsive shopping. If you're going and shopping when you should be at work and get fired, yeah, that's a problem. Also looking at, the cost, whether it's a monetary cost or a relational cost. And looking at, a lot of people use pornography for coping, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Distraction is good. Getting into your body, focusing on somatic stuff is good. Is it the only coping skill you have? Then perhaps we need to look at some other coping mechanisms and coping skills. So yeah, does it interfere with work, with relationships? Would you rather watch porn than have sex with your partner? Maybe there's a libido mismatch. A lot of times partners will not have the same libido as the person that they're dating. And so then one person feels like they have to masturbate and watch porn to help kind of even that out. And again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes that can be a useful tool for couples that do have that libido mismatch.
Yeah, I love this so much. I mean, I think, again, if we come from these religiously conservative spaces or even moral conservative spaces, I think we're really taught sexuality through the lens of partnership, and that's the only lens, right? So I can see, for example, this idea that any masturbation, which, by the way, that's the number one reason why people look at porn. Yes, because they're masturbating. Yes. So we can't really talk about one without talking the other. So any masturbation is time and energy that you're spending that should be spent with me, right? If I'm your partner. And so just the fact that you would touch your own body or have your own erotic fantasies or anything like that is problematic to our fidelity, right? And so there's really I think a lot of people are missing this idea that actually in a relationship with yourself on many levels, not just sexually, but just self-care, time, exercise, whatever is important. It's important for our well-being, and sexuality is no different. So yes, when people come in and tell me there's a problem, it's usually this. It's like, well, they're spending energies outside of me, or it's out of control. And like you say, well, what does it mean to be out of control? Well, I can't stop. Well, what do you mean by that? Well, I've been masturbating once a month for my whole life and I can't stop. Okay. So again, there's this kind of like all or nothing, some kind of approach that these communities take to this. It's like there just can be nothing. So if we can start by understanding, actually, I have a right to my own body. You have a right to your own body, right? Touching ourselves, we do it for a lot of reasons. One is self-soothing, because even this coping thing, I've heard a lot of therapists go, well, like, yeah, we don't want to shame it, but if you're using it to cope, like it's this really bad thing. We use exercise to cope. Is exercise bad because we're using it to cope? We use food to cope. Sometimes that's done in healthy ways, sometimes not so healthy ways. We use our friends to cope. Am I using you because I'm using you to cope? Right. So I think masturbation and pornography, if you're using it to cope and to de-stress, that can actually be part of your healthy, like you said, diversity of ways that you can cope with life, de-stress. I mean, babies suck their thumbs and they touch their genitals. Those are coping mechanisms when they're self-soothing, and we're no different as adults. And even this libido difference, like I think it's a wonderful tool. Like you're saying, okay, you prefer to have sex like 3 or 4 times a week, and I kind of like to show up to that space once or twice a week. Great. We have got ways to take care of ourselves. There doesn't have to be this pressure, which I'm sure you agree with, that you see a lot of pressure-oriented sex in these couples that come from these communities.
Yes. Yeah. A lot of pressure-oriented sex, a lot of, as you said, ownership of others' bodies in a way that isn't helpful to the relationship, isn't helpful to the individual. Yeah. Like you said, porn can be a very useful tool in a lot of these situations that's being vilified.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I I think just expanding the conversation, right? So I think that's really important. And also this idea that it's addictive. Prousey, so Dr. Nicole Prousey, who was one of the people in that research study that you mentioned about what are the benefits for couples. I know that she has given some interviews on my show as well, and she's doing a lot of wonderful work. She's a neuroscientist, and she said what she explained one time is that what really shifts it from an addiction model, and what we have not been able to show in the research, is that somehow after you watch porn and masturbate and come to completion, satiety is reached. So if you're wanting to masturbate and now you're looking at porn to masturbate and you ejaculate or you have an orgasm, you're done. You're done. And this actually differs from a lot of other behaviors that, even though they're not substance related, like video gaming and gambling and compulsive shopping, that it doesn't matter that you bought the shirt. You're not satiated. You buy another shirt, right? It doesn't matter that you just won, at the slot machine. You just put your credit card in and keep playing. There's no satiation. Whereas with sex, there is at least a time frame where you're satiated. So one of the things that's so interesting is when people come in with compulsive, or they think they have a porn addiction, and I ask them, well, are you masturbating? You said most people will say, well, 15, 20 minutes. And I would agree with that. I think it's usually about 5 to 20 minutes that most people are looking at porn. Unless they're doing a couple, sometimes that can take longer because they're having fun together. But if a person comes in and tells me, I've been looking at it for 2 to 4 hours, I immediately ask the question, are you masturbating? And a lot of these folks, who again, usually have a religious component to this, will say, well, no, I don't want to masturbate. That's really bad. And I'm like, oh goodness, if you would just masturbate, you'd cut down your pornography viewing time probably by 3/4 of the time.
Yeah. I haven't experienced that yet with clients, but that makes so much sense. Yeah, that's fascinating. That's fascinating. This idea of, oh yeah, I'm just watching it. I'm not masturbating. I guess I did have this assumption that, you're masturbating while you're watching porn because that's why you watch it.
Yeah, it's not as common of a presentation, but I have had it. And it's usually because the person is telling me that for whatever reason in their mind, masturbation is a worse sin than looking at porn. And so they're abstaining from masturbating, but they're doing the porn watching. So I'm like, that makes it worse. You're like enticing yourself. You're making it more exciting, and then you're having no release.
And then it would likely lead to more compulsive behavior, because then you do keep on needing to feed that and not get that release.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so having said all of this, we've kind of set it up for this term that you're using, moral incongruence. What do you mean by that? What does that mean versus this kind of like addiction model?
Yeah. Well, when looking at the literature and looking at it from a treatment side, it's important to figure out why a client has what they view as a porn problem, whether it's behavioral. We went over that a little bit, and there's specific modalities for behavioral issues, specific therapies. There's CBT, there's exposure and response prevention. But the majority, by a large margin, of what we see in people who think that they have a porn problem is moral incongruence. And moral incongruence is defined as having one's behaviors not match up with their beliefs. So you're being told and you're taking in the value of pornography is evil, pornography is wrong, you are a bad person if you engage in watching pornography, and then you go and do it anyway. Then that's when the shame kicks in. That's when a lot of the adverse effects kick in. Shame regarding pornography watching is much more harmful than the watching of pornography. That's what makes it have bad outcomes. That's what studies have shown is the true harm from watching pornography, is the shame that is inflicted in people because of the moral incongruity that they're experiencing.
Well, amen to all of that. And this is what is so frustrating, especially when and I could see this for years as I was a member of my church, that there was so much anxiety and so much worry about people looking at porn, and their idea of, okay, well, how do we solve this problem, is to make people feel really, really horrible if they would look at porn, and we would have talk after talk after talk where they would bring up all the ways it will damage you, all the things it will do to your wife and family, is, usually talking to men. Women look at porn too. And so then women would even feel worse, like, oh, this must only be a man who does this, so I must be a really bad woman if I look at porn, and of course that's just addressing the gender binary. But, this is how we're addressed usually at church, is, through a male female binary approach. And so it's just so, and I could see that anxiety and that fear and that shame would actually perpetuate the problem more often, much more often than it would ever stop the problem or even reduce the behavior. And then not only to see that at church, but then to see it in my colleagues in the mental health space, be complicit with this type of model. And like you're saying, we have so many sex addiction centers here in Utah. Probably the next place that I would see the most of that was where I lived, like in Wichita, Kansas. Tons of churches would have like pastoral counselors or Christian counselors running sex addiction programs. And so it's like, this is our belief. This is our belief. Therefore, we look at it through the lens of that belief. And now that is what is actually causing the problem. Yeah. And it feels so unfair to me because I see all these other folks who are not as religious, which is so ironic, right? Because religious people are trying to be righteous. They're trying to be really good. They're trying to be wonderful and, get to heaven and all those kinds of things. So here's some people that are really, really wanting to be good. Here's the rest of the people that are not as interested. Obviously most people want to be good, but they're not as interested in all of that morality that comes in religion. And they're having a much easier time at life. They're actually much more what I would say, quote unquote, blessed than those who are trying so hard to do it just the right way. And it was just driving me crazy because I could see how it hurt what I consider my people, the people I cared about, the people I was treating. And this has been researched multiple times, even out of universities like Brigham Young University. There's research that shows that the real problem is the shame. Joshua Grubbs has done amazing work in this department as a researcher, and really does say that the distress is what is problematic. And it's not just the distress of the porn user, it's usually the distress of usually a female partner that's attached to that porn user in these communities.
Yeah, I came across studies that showed that moral incongruence regarding pornography use correlated with higher distress regarding the use, greater psychological stress in general, greater reports of perceived addiction to pornography, and then the shame piece. The shame piece, I think, is so important and integral to this conversation. And all of the focus, I was curious as I was prepping for this podcast. I was like, I wonder how many times pornography has been mentioned in general conference talks. So I found a website that you could search by keyword, and over 240 times has the word pornography been in a conference talk. That's a lot of conference talks about porn. And guess what happens if I tell you not to think about a pink elephant? What are you thinking about right now?
Yeah, a pink elephant just came to my mind, Natalie. Yeah. I wonder why that happened.
Yeah. So not only is the conversation around porn shaming, the church can't shut up about it. So what's on everybody's mind? Porn. And it just feeds itself, this shame cycle.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I would agree with that. And another thing that I saw in the research too, along with everything you said, is that a lot of times people are going to sex addiction treatment centers, which, by the way, are very expensive, usually not covered by insurance because, again, there's no diagnosis that can be given. Most people don't even understand that porn addiction there's no diagnosis for that. So if you're getting treated and insurance is paying for it, they've usually diagnosed you with something else like anxiety or depression, but in of itself, they don't. So these treatment centers are not covered. I've heard of so many people who are like putting out a second mortgage on their home to pay for pornography addiction. And when you really look at their behavior, oftentimes it's for less porn watching than mainstream USA citizens.
Yes.
And so think about that. Most people are going out there, living their lives, spending their money on other interesting things. And then you've got people who are watching less porn than most people, spending all this time and energy and therapy time and marital counseling and even going on sites, and then identifying themselves as a porn addict and telling their whole community that they're a porn addict because, you're not supposed to be in denial and you're supposed to own and be responsible. And so now everybody knows your business, which is really private, personal information. It's so shaming. And I think what drives me the most nuts is when these addiction therapists will tell me, oh, no, it's not a program based on shame. And I'm like, B to the S, right? Like BS. Like that is not true. They may not have really stepped away from it enough to understand how it is a shaming approach. And that's very concerning to me. Do you want to talk about the monetary part of this? I didn't know.
Oh, no, you're fine. Yeah. There are a couple things I'd like to mention about these treatment centers. Yes, the monetary side of it, it's big business. I was trying to find a specific number. And of course, it's well hidden, this revenue of these porn addiction programs. However, they are extremely expensive. They can be, I think I saw one that was like $40,000 a month, and it's, this month-long process. Like you were saying, people are mortgaging their houses trying to cover this. It's not covered by insurance because there isn't a diagnosis in what we use the DSM to diagnose, so insurance companies won't cover it. Also, I think it's important to note that many of these programs are run by various religious organizations, and they don't have licensed professionals, and they don't use evidence-based treatment and research in these programs. And they are very shame-based, even if they say they're not. Just because you say something is so doesn't make it so. Yeah, it is very shame-based, and a lot of them are a zero-sum goal, an abstinence goal, which even in the addiction sphere is not possible. Relapse is part of recovery, even though this isn't addiction in that way. And we're human. It's not possible to completely abstain from things like this. And then the shame kicks in. Oh, I looked at porn. I'm a bad person now, and I have to start this all over again. And the shame cycle just feeds on itself so much.
Yeah. No, I mean, who hasn't heard that Jodi Hildebrandt has been in the news these days, especially in Utah or LDS culture, and she was one of these types of people. And yeah, I've heard, $50,000 a month, $40,000 a month. I mean, there's a reason why she was able to afford her $3 million house in St. George, where most of us therapists are not really usually able to afford a $3 million home in a tourist town, right? And so, I mean, it is, and people are desperate. And this is what makes me so angry, is I just feel like these folks are vulnerable, and how Consumer Reports are not involved is just beyond me. Another reason why insurance doesn't pay, by the way, is not because there isn't a diagnosis. Like, for example, there are diagnoses for narcissistic personality disorder, but insurance doesn't cover treatment for that because there really hasn't been shown an effective treatment approach that they can say, if you do this type of therapy, this will help. And so they're not going to cover something that there's no effective treatment for. So I just want to, again, stay as loud as I can. There's nothing showing that these programs work. To your point, what does it mean for it to work? The goals of most of these folks that come from these religious communities is zero pornography use, zero masturbation. This is not how human beings work. It's not. So you are putting yourself in a place, like, it's like if I was 5 foot and I'm going to spend $40,000 to figure out how I'm going to dunk basketball, it is not going to work. Nothing you're going to be able to teach me is going to work, right? And so you can spend all the money you want on something that will be completely ineffective. And for me, I can see, and I'm sure you've seen this, Natalie, too, it actually exacerbates the issues because people then usually go down another road of secrecy and duplicity, which then increases the betrayal trauma, especially of partners, because it's like, well, this is the 5th time you've lied to me about this. This is the 10th time you've lied to me about this. Because since I can't give you the answer you desperately want, and I desperately want to give you because I want to stay partnered with you, we go back into lying and deception, which is also a very normal human trait.
Yes. And it just starts that cycle, and that cycle feeds on itself. And it's unfortunate. It's sad. It's, I would even use the term dangerous. A lot of times feelings of suicidal ideation come along with shame and pornography use. How sad that somebody would choose to take their life because of this external shame placed on them for healthy, appropriate adult sexual behavior.
Yeah, exactly. If you watch cooking shows, if you watch reality TV, if you watch really any show at all with any human in it, you should be able to understand that we enjoy watching other humans. It's that simple. When people are like, but why do people look at porn? Most of us like to watch other humans doing anything from really silly things to home remodeling to whatever it is. We enjoy it. We are pack animals, and sex is no different. And so it doesn't have to be so confusing as to why people might watch other people have sex. It's titillating, it's exciting, it's curious, it's educating in some ways. Not that porn is the best place to get your education, but I'm not going to lie. I now do things that I probably wouldn't have done if I hadn't seen them first on porn, and they're very enjoyable things that I love, right? And so there's things I watch on porn that I really have zero interest in. So that we are influenced by other people in every aspect of life, and sex is no different. All right. Well, let's close up then, Natalie, with what do we do instead then? If we're not going to take an addictions approach, if we're not going to, take a shame approach, what can we do?
Yeah. So when working with shame, when I treat shame with my clients, there are a couple, 2 or 3 different things I do. First, I like to normalize behaviors that have been vilified, in this case by high demand religions. For example, the clients that come in and say, oh, I have a porn problem, I'm watching it, once a week. Well, that's less than average usually. Here's what other people view as quote unquote normal porn use. So normalizing those behaviors, normalizing those instincts as well. Here's what human development looks like. Here's what a healthy sexual human development looks like. Here's what we can expect within our own bodies. I think that normalization piece is really, really important, because this extreme behavior is so put on a pedestal, this extreme behavior of not masturbating, of not watching porn, of having sexual desires at the complete right time, in the complete right way, with the complete right person. We're humans. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I think the normalizing is huge. And I think some people won't buy into this, Natalie, right? Some people will say, well, I don't care that it's normal. This is still my value. And of course, people have a right to their values and their beliefs and their standards of behavior. I think it is useful, if you come from a religion, to think about a behavior from any other religion that you don't follow. So whether it's wearing certain garb, like a hijab, or whether it's eating pork, like the Orthodox Jewish folks, and wonder, like, okay, I don't see a problem with that behavior. Most people don't behave in that way. They have a right to behave in that way. Obviously, that may have deep meaning for them, but it's important to separate behaviors chosen due to religious morality and standards versus thinking it through, now I'm sick or diseased, or there's something wrong with me because I ate pork and I'm an Orthodox Jewish person. That's not that. We wouldn't send somebody to a pork addiction program. We would just say, oh yeah, you're struggling to keep the standards of behavior of your particular religious culture.
Yes, and that definitely speaks to another aspect I work with, separating behavior from personal value. I am a bad thing versus I did a bad thing. You're right. Some people will still want to reduce their porn use, or will not want to buy into normalizing it. That's okay. You get to have your values. You get to say what matters to you. But then taking the shame out of that. Okay, so you watched porn when you didn't want to. That doesn't make you a bad person. That means that you did a behavior that you're trying to change. This can apply to any behavior that we are trying to change, whether it is, snapping at somebody, maybe snapping at your partner. When you're angry, okay, let's look at that and see what led up to that and see what we can do instead of that. Let's get some coping skills around it. But really separating that value judgment about yourself away from, oh, I'm bad for doing that, into, okay, I did this, I don't want to do that. That thing I did is not something I want to engage in, and separating that shame and taking that shame out of it. Another area I really work with clients is self-compassion. A lot of people think that self-compassion is excusing oneself and being able to do whatever you want. It's not that. Self-compassion is self-kindness. Seeing the common humanity, so knowing that your own experience is part of a larger human experience and other people experience what you're experiencing. And then also there's a mindfulness piece in it, which is really living in the present, not judging yourself for the past, not worrying about the future. Right now I can control what's happening right now. But that self-kindness piece, again, is what is missing with so many of these cases that I see. There is that self-judgment. There is that self-hatred. There is that, oh, I'm a terrible person because I did this. Not, oh, I'm a human that messes up sometimes. Or I'm a human that is experiencing this and it's okay to experience it because I'm looking at my values and realizing that it's okay to engage with myself or with a partner sexually in these ways that I haven't before.
I love that. Yeah. So please, I think a lot of what you're saying is educate yourself, normalize behaviors. Then after you've normalized it, you can still choose to have your whatever beliefs you're going to have, and then approach those beliefs and standards through a lens of self-compassion, through separating behavior from personal value, and focusing on behavior that does align, right, with your values. So yeah. I love that. I'm all for that. I'm so glad that you kind of put this information together in a way that's, I think, very easily accessible. And we'll be sharing that flyer that you came up with on the show notes. And I'll even try to figure out if I can put it here in the comment threads.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm grateful for this opportunity to talk about this. I think anytime that we can destigmatize and take away the shame, whether it's about pornography or anything else, is so important. And accessing our own humanity and stepping into being our healthiest, most fulfilled selves in a way that sometimes high demand religion butts up against.
I totally agree. I have a comment from one of our listeners. He shares my mission president. So this is Mark, and he's comes from a Latter-day Saint background, because you can see my mission president. So my mission president threatened to send me home after I admitted to masturbating one time. It scared me straight for almost 5 months, but when it happened again, I learned to lie. I kept that shit quiet the rest of my mission. As a current member, I finally learned it's nobody's business but my own. Now I love it. It's relaxing and wonderful. So that's somebody who's basically signaling that they're still a member of their church. They're still engaged, and having some self-authority to decide, even though I'm hearing these messages, what is healthiest for me, and has normalized some of that behavior for himself in a way that's much healthier. So thank you, Mark, for that comment. And yeah, Natalie, so tell us a little bit about kind of where, if people want to work with you, if people are interested in finding out more about you or want to send you a question or whatever, how do people get a hold of you?
Yes. So my website is nataliehenrytherapy.com. That's NATALIE Henry HENRY therapy.com. My email is natalie@nataliehenrytherapy.com, or you can contact me on my website. I'm currently working with just individuals. I'm not doing couples. And you have to be in the state of Washington during when we meet. I am looking at getting licensed in some other states. That's probably a couple months out, though. So if you're hearing this in a couple months, reach out. Maybe I'll be licensed in your state. Like I said at the beginning, I'm really interested in the intersection of the queer experience and religious trauma, but I'm not limited to just that. If you think we'd be a good fit, reach out. I'd love to work with you. I do have some openings right now.
Okay, that's great to know. So NatalieHenryTherapy.com.
Yes.
And again, we'll include that in the show notes and in the threads as well. She's a great resource. She's also part of the Mormon Mental Health Association, which you can look up, and we have a therapist directory. It's a secular organization that we created 10 years ago now, which is amazing, where you can find ethical therapists that are either LDS or have been LDS or LDS adjacent, and work with a lot of LDS folks and are doing so in ethically informed ways without their own religious bias getting in the way of your therapy, which sometimes is hard to find when you're working within the realm of religion, spirituality, and mental health. So we're both a part of that. And then if you're interested in any of the services, I run this group practice called Symmetry Counseling. All of my providers are very much influenced and trained by my ideas and my ways of doing things, as well as bringing their own perspectives and backgrounds to our team. And we have openings as well. We do both therapy in several states that many of us are licensed in, as well as offering wellness coaching and counseling to people who need help outside of the states we practice in for therapy. And sometimes these things can fit into that, like if you're just needing some education around pornography, if you're needing just if you're a couple and you just want some suggestions on how to start having a more sex positive life, you don't need necessarily, clinical therapy, and we can help you through a coaching model. So those are all resources you can find at Sym Counseling, symcounseling.com. You can also find me at natashahelfer.com. Thank you so much for listening. Please, if you're a listener, if you could, send us feedback. If there's any topic that you'd love for me to cover, let me know. We'd love to hear it. So have a great rest of your day, Natalie. We'll take care, everybody.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. It was great to talk with you on this.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Natasha Helfer Podcast. To help keep this podcast going, please consider donating at natashahelfer.com and share this episode. To watch the video of this podcast, you can subscribe to Natasha's channel on YouTube and follow her professional page at Natasha Helfer, LCMFT, CST-S. You can find all her cool resources at natashahelfer.com. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or feelings of Natasha Helfer or the Natasha Helfer Podcast. We provide a platform for open and diverse discussions, and it is important to recognize that different perspectives may be shared. We encourage our listeners to engage in critical thinking and form their own opinions. The intro and outro music for these episodes are by Otter Creek. Thank you for listening.
There is a place where time slows to nature's pace, and there is space there to find yourself in her embrace. Some places should be left alone. Now tishki say the so we can always go to the homeland of the heart. 10,000 years of our human history etched on her canyon walls, alongside Earth's mysteries. Some places should be left alone. So we can always go to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland of the heart. Deep in our city stars, yet still her presence sustains us from afar. Some places should be left alone. Not so we can always go to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland of the heart.